me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the co-host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is the Dawg and Desperado Fantasy Football Show, episode 10, Friday. Can you believe the 22nd already? I looked at the calendar, and next Sunday is October 1st. 1 month already will be completed in the NFL season. Week 3, as I put up in the description of the show, injuries, and more injuries. And what me and Shawn will be trying to do here is talk some season-long updates already. Week 3, San Francisco, kind of just a professional work-like performance against the Giants. And I've had already a couple lengthy talks with colleagues on the inept offense of Daniel Jones and the Giants. No Saquon Barkley, and as vanilla as it gets. They bring in Darren Waller. They have a speedster of Jalen Hyatt that they're just not finding ways to get on the field, and just kind of a pretty disgusting performance. A lot of question marks: who's playing, who's not playing. So we'll talk some regular season potential injuries, updates, who to plug in if these guys aren't playing, but then also what Shawn is here for is to get you ready for the potential Millie Maker, some of the other prop parlays and stuff that you might be able to look for in the prop market to cash some big tickets over the weekend. Shawn, 3 times been to the big dance at DraftKings, potential to win millions. Just last year, week 13, I think it was, cashed almost $300,000 with DraftKings. So he knows a little something about what he's about to tell us. So without further ado, let's bring him in. The one and only, the Hall of Famer, Mr. Shawn Childs.
Yeah, each year I play fantasy baseball, I lower the bar. No, but the thing about baseball or fantasy football is that especially at the level we're playing, is that you want to kind of, if you can hang around and break even, make a little bit of money, and then pop, and then, get your chance like you did in 2017, that's what you're playing for. You don't know when your next ticket is going to get punched for, where you can, win an overall, but, you keep hanging around and, you never know. You get in the right draft and it breaks right. And, and the things go well late in the season, you take home a big check. So that's ultimate goal when playing DFS, baseball, football. And we also have something to occupy our minds all year or make us pull our hairs out, whatever you want to think, with all the injuries and stuff.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've said this a million times, and for the newbies that are just joining us that don't understand it, is in 2017, I was blessed to win 2 national titles in the NFFC. And the point I'm trying to make here is, going into week 13, I had no starting quarterback. And I picked up 3 off of the scrap heap, the waiver wire, and we rode Blake Bortles to the promised land. And my point is, I look at all the drafts that I'm involved in, either I drafted or I'm managing right now. There's some 1s, there's some 2s, there's some 3s, some good starts. Maybe it was the Dallas D, maybe it was Tyreek Hill. My point is, there's a lot of 10s, 11s, and 12s there as well. And it wasn't that we drafted the wrong players, they just haven't fired. And that's what makes it so hard when you go into the waiver wire, especially on Wednesdays, not so much on Saturday, is, are you going to overbid for the new shiny toy, the flavor of the week? 2 weeks ago was Kendrick Bourne, and a few others. This past week, there was a bunch of other names that some people paid some high prices for, or you're going to stand pat with the team you drafted and then just try to add depth. Shawn, explain to those people your thought process. We spend hours, weeks, months preparing for the long haul in the regular season. Now into week 3, and you have some of those slow starting teams, the approach when you're going into Wednesday on the waiver wire.
I think that probably the first thing we should look at, or when you're playing the things, you need to score in a 12-team high stakes market, the NFFC, FFWC, or FFPC type events, or even RT Sports. If you average like 145 points a week, you're kind of a contender. If you average 155, you got a really good team. If you got 165, you got a great team. You're off to the races. So when you're looking at your scores after the first 2 weeks, it's been relatively low scoring. If you scored 270 points, 280 points, you're in the game. You know what I mean? You might be 1-1, you might be 2-0, you could be 0-2. Depends on the format and how it broke for the schedule. But you have to look at where you stand in points and then evaluate your team. And when you're setting your lineup that if you have a really second running back that's looking really iffy, you got David Montgomery. All right, I think I got a pretty good player. Now this week I have to put in some guy that I'm hoping to get like 8 points, or even if he's going to be on the field. I mean, you have a glaring weakness. And maybe you have Alvin Kamara, maybe you got Jonathan Taylor, so you have to kind of be true to evaluate your team. So, but you can't, when you get to the waiver wire, you can't shove on something that's not that great. I mean, I know the Kendrick Bourne stuff, people spend a ton of money, but he's been around for X amount of years. He's been okay. And maybe I think at best he's been a wide receiver 4. He's certainly not a $500 player, even if he's getting a lot of snaps for New England. It's going to cycle out, and he's going to be one of those players when you go to set your lineup is like, can I really put him in every week? So unless you're buying somebody that's a bridge player that you think you can carry for a couple weeks, or somebody that's going to fill your roster, like Puka from the Rams. I mean, you think when people spend $500 on him, I mean, they might have hit on something. We'll see if the guy can stay healthy, and we'll see if some other defenses adjust. So, I mean, I think you have to look at where your team stands. And like I have a Joe Burrow team in the NFFC. I think I scored 180 something points after 2 weeks. I mean, I had Chase and Burrow. Burrow's a 32nd ranked quarterback. Chase ranks relatively low. If those guys did what they're supposed to, maybe I would be at like 240. I took a 0 out of that go there. I'd still be trailing, but I have Kamara and Jonathan Taylor on that team. But when I look at the lineup, I was like, I have one spot that's kind of off, and I don't know what I'm going to get out of Burrow for the rest of the year, especially if the calf lingers. I would feel a lot better if I had Cousins as the backup, which I have in some places, but some of those teams I didn't play Cousins over Chase. If I did, what is that worth? Like 40 more points 2 weeks into the season. So those little mistakes when you get to the end of the year and you wonder why you're 60 points out of winning your league. I mean, it could be the first couple of weeks, and it's not really your fault. I mean, sometimes you just don't know that the best players have identified themselves in your lineup, and and it's hard to be, when you got a lot of players the same, to get the right decisions. And, we talk about that before, the less decisions you make, the better chance you have of having success. But that takes the draft to break well and the players to perform up to expectations.
Let's stay on Burrow. T. Higgins puts up the goose egg week 1. Monsoon, offensive line wasn't great. You could see Burrow just throwing it into the ground. Week 2, T. Higgins, shorter routes. Jamar Chase, his routes take a lot longer. And again, Burrow's last touchdown, he goes to the bench and he pulls that massage machine on the calf. He's swearing, blah, 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 blah. What do you do? Let me ask you a question. It's a Monday night game with Joe. Actually, yeah, he's got the Monday night game at 8:15. Are you under the assumption Joe's not playing? Do you have his backup? Are you going to go in Saturday and go get Browning and just going to stick with Joe in the lineup? And if he doesn't start, you're going to just, ride the wave of Browning? Or how are you doing that this week?
I have a team with Cousins and Burrow. That's a pretty straightforward. I can avoid the disaster and play Cousins. I had a team with Purdy, that team that was really bad, and Cousins. I had to play Purdy last night. I can't take a chance, and I didn't want to go to the waiver wire to get at the quarterback. Some of the other teams, I might have a Russell Wilson or Burrow, so I have at least till Sunday to figure that out. I don't feel good about Burrow playing, but I think there's a chance that he play because I don't think the Bengals can go on 3. But he plays. He has the risk of leaving early too. I think the matchup's favorable, so I would think in most cases he'll probably end up out of my lineup for whatever reason. I don't. It would have to be really kind of a team that I had a really kind of below par backup, unless the news is more positive. I think that he wants to play. I think they want to keep him in the pocket, and he probably gives them better chance to win than the backup. But you know, it's a long season. I know that you think that he doesn't play for sure, and because of the movement in the line. And I just think of the seasons on the line, 0-3, how many teams make the playoffs. But ultimately we don't make that decision, and we're playing fantasy, and we're trying to just survive one more week. So I would say that probably he doesn't end up in a lot of lineups, even though I would like to have him on the field because I have Chase, because it actually ruins his value too, most likely, because I don't see the backup quarterback having a lot of success.
Monday night, Chubb goes down, a gruesome injury. In comes Jerome Ford. A little struggle at first, and then has some decent runs, and then in comes Kareem Hunt. Montgomery, for some reason, wouldn't go down, kept pulling and pulling. Next thing you know, he's out with a thigh bruise. The way I understand a lot of your teams, especially the Detroit, Gibbs more carries, more looks. In comes Craig Reynolds. They showed Kareem Hunt practicing yesterday. Again, he's been with Cleveland, knows the system, was on a free agent for a long, long time, waiting for this opportunity. It couldn't have, we're not rooting for injuries, but it couldn't have worked any better for him. If it was anyone else, I don't think he'd be playing, other than the Browns right now. So what do the Brown and Chubb owners do if they had Ford or if they have Hunt? And then the Gibbs owners are obviously you're still playing them anyways, but what are you doing with a Craig Reynolds, for instance? Atlanta hasn't given up a rushing touchdown. They've given up just over 200 yards. It is in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, Ford obviously is going to get the first opportunity. He looked good, but he made one big play and he scored a touchdown that kind of set up his day. Between those two things, they were probably, including the catch, more than half of his fantasy points. I think he scored 27. Maybe it was only 24 because I was looking at DraftKings and he probably got the 3-point bonus for. He got 100 yards, I think, in that game. So, so Hunt's the veteran. He's a physical guy. He can catch the ball a little bit. He even when Chubb was there a couple of years ago, he was a factor when they were at the goal line. They put him in sometimes. So that's a concern for Hunt as well. So I think they want to give the guy that's there the opportunity, but ultimately the success on the field is going to determine who gets the most playing time. They paid Hunt $4 million for 1 year, so kind of thought that jumped him in front of Strong automatically. His experience, what they're paying him, and possibly what he does on 3-down ability thing. So I would think this week that Ford's okay to play. Don't expect a good thing. Tennessee's got has been really good last year and this year against the run. So he's not going to have as much running room. And Cleveland's ran the ball extremely well, almost close to 200 yards or 200 yards in back-to-back games. So I think that changes this week where Cleveland has to find their way passing the ball. And nobody trusts Deshaun Watson at this point of the season. He was okay the first week and maybe. But after last week, maybe not so much. And as far as Detroit, Gibbs is going to get the ball a lot. They're going to mix in Reynolds. When they're at their 1 yard line, will Gibbs get the call? I don't think so. He could, score inside the 10 if he breaks a run, but it will be interesting. This is one of the weeks where he's kind of got a pretty good matchup. It's at home. He will catch the ball. He got more chances last week, and he just has that skill set where last year they had like 3 or 4 runs that were really long, like 50-yarders, and really kind of made big days for the running backs. Detroit's running backs scored, 25, more than 25 touchdowns last year. So I think Gibbs is a really, really attractive play. The potential's exciting, and the spacing in his offensive line should be, point to him having success against the things. Reynolds, if they blow him out, that increases his chances. He gets a few more carries and stuff like that, but more of a steady fill, and hope he scores a touchdown to get it in the teens. But I think he's a tough start. And they did say, even they're still saying Montgomery has a chance to play, but if he's that close, right, why not give him another week? So I don't know.
Well, being a David Montgomery guy, he just kept falling to the 7-10, 7-11, 7-12 range. I'm like, well, if you're going to give him to me, he's my most owned guy out of anyone in all my drafts. And he came out on Sunday and says it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. It's to heal. And it was Campbell that came out on Tuesday, says, David, like it or not, you day to day, and shut the bleep up. So, so I don't see him playing this week anyways. Let's go on the other side of that ball. First round draft pick in most leagues, once in a while, make it to the 1-2 turn. That end of that first round was a death trap. You were staring at Barkley, Chubb, and Bijan. And Bijan is just, they showed some of the clips and his movement, breaking ankles. Thoughts initially just after 2 games on Bijan?
Yeah, disappointed because I didn't hit a parlay in week 1 that if he scored a touchdown, I would have won a couple grand. But overall, he's one of 2. I think 2 running backs have scored 20 points each week. His usage went up last week. The game kind of changed, and Algier, was less impressive, 16 for 48. So who the better back is, and you would think that Robinson would kind of hopefully work his way into maybe a 65% chance at the goal line opportunity, and maybe if they have multiple in the game. So he was a player I was willing to push a little bit higher in one of the formats into the first round, because I expected to get a pretty good, especially if you're 8, 9, and 10, you get still the drop off at wide receiver is pretty good in the second round, and some of the value at wide receiver in the third round slid too. And you also had the opportunity that Gibbs was in play. So I think that Bijan set up a lot of teams, and I end up with him, I think, 5 times in the high stakes market, and in the high stakes one of the events. The other ones in the NFFC, I picked to only had 1 team, but I have enough of him. Pretty excited about him. And it's just like, by taking him first, you kind of change the draft a little bit, and maybe that helps you avoid taking a receiver and falling into like a Saquon or a Chubb in the second round, depending on where you were picking. So interesting how like one little decision can affect your fantasy team in such a big way, at least now, because obviously Bijan has to stay healthy for the rest of the year and perform at a high level as well.
2 teams. One, I'm not going to say waving the white flag. One team definitely is a dumpster fire. I'm going to start with the Steelers. Open up at home against the Niners. They were blown out in the first quarter, never in that game. And then last weekend, Monday night, 2 defensive touchdowns against a real good Browns defense. Now, I put the 49ers and Browns defenses in the top 5, 6 throughout the league. Now Pickett gets to go to a controlled environment, to Vegas, whose defense is not good. Again, the Deontay Johnson will be out till their bye week 6, I think, or 7 it is. In comes Pickens, who they wanted to stretch the field. Now he's going to be the possession receiver and stretch the field. Frymouth, okay, game 1, really nowhere to be found game 2. Allen Robinson, I just don't get it. He showed flashes game 1, nowhere to game 2. And now Jalen Warren. Najee Harris has just looked like cement compared to Jalen Warren. It reminds me last year, Shawn, of Zeke running the ball on first and second down, and in comes Pollard on third down. You can see who the better back was. Give me your assess. Give me what you're expecting from the Steelers this week in Vegas.
Yeah, I guess the question is, are there secondary receiving options behind Pickens enough to make their quarterback viable, at least as a QB2, and or even win enough games? Like you said, the matchup looks pretty good. Their defense, played pretty good against Cleveland, and they did catch the 49ers. They're a pretty good team. So I'm not excited. I know you were more excited about the quarterback play coming into the season, especially that team looked really sharp in the preseason. They were scoring points. You thought they kind of had a little bounce in their step, but they are, they're 1-1, right? So after the first 2 weeks, right, they're 1-1. So they're in the hunt, and last year, the coaches, hasn't had a losing record ever. So I think that they'll find their way, and between the two running backs, they'll make enough plays. Obviously, Harris is more of a physical pounding back that kind of needs, the offensive line to create some holes, and, at least to get the second level of the defense, where Warren looks a little more dynamic and he's going to get in the way. But in the past, but when they had Le'Veon Bell, even Harris in his first year, they kind of leaned on one back. But this year it's going to be, I don't even know if it might end up be a 55-45 split, and it could even slant to Warren as the season goes on. The only player that you could say for sure that's a weekly starter right now is probably Pickens, due to the injury. And even last week, if he didn't hit on that big play, he wouldn't be too exciting. But, when the schedule softens up a little bit, I think the overall players in the package will look better. Will they be a high-scoring team in the NFL? I don't think so, but at least they'll be competitive in games.
Now the dumpster fire of all dumpster fires, in one of my earlier drafts in the NFFC, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get cute. I'm going to get creative. I'm going to get early into the QB carousel here. And I think it was at the 3-4 turn, I did a DJ Moore and Justin Fields. Now that Justin basically calls out his robotic performances based on the coaching. Not going to get into the story with the defensive coach that had his house raided, that resigned yesterday. They get to travel to Kansas City, who, laid an egg 2-3 weeks ago at home against Detroit, basically shuts out Lawrence in Jacksonville. Jones is back. This is a get well game. It's already at 12.5 for the 48. What do you do with the Bears? DJ Moore, Justin Fields. It looks like Roscoe Johnson is leaning on Herbert, Cole Kmet. What's your thoughts on the Bears this week?
Are you suggesting that Chicago is thinking it isn't the Fields of Dreams?
Strawberry Fields forever.
So, you could see last week when, Fields tried to linger in the pocket to make plays and pass, and it just, you could see there was openings to run the ball, and he didn't take them, and then they collapsed, and he couldn't escape. He was at his best last year when he was freelancing, and he didn't have as good of a receiving options, or at least have more there. So I think that he was right, like being a little more robotic or less reactive. So I think that against Kansas City, he will be willing to run more. Their defense played pretty good, but a lot of his value is on the rushing yards and potential rushing touchdowns. And he has to settle in and kind of get to where he was in college, at least passing the ball. His completion rate was a lot higher. He made bigger plays. I mean, he's got that capability, but he tends to be, when they fall behind, he doesn't have that thing to, complete drives for touchdowns and, perform really well, like in the red zone, at least, passing the ball. So he's going to be a tricky player, but he still has the potential to pop in those 40-point games. And he was like an 18-18 out of the gate, and I think 4-point passing touchdown league. So he's definitely trailing some of the top quarterbacks, but like Hurts and some of the other guys up top haven't had those explosive games as well. So Long season because of the defensive side of the ball for the Bears, but I think the quarterback play will be more productive, at least from the fun side of his running, but maybe not as much for the passing, But I think he'll still average over 200 yards. He's hit 200 yards in a row. He'll be better than last year for sure.
Shout out to Marty Lowe. What's up, Marty? Big game for your Alabama Crimson Tide, 7-point favorites against your buddy Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. So best of luck there. A lot of games to talk about, but I'm not going to sit here and waste everyone's time. We're already 26 minutes in. Your strengths, one of a million of your strengths, is obviously I'd like to talk about the DraftKings Millie Maker or some of the other prop markets that you get into on Sunday where you can get a big ticket, a nice score. I know you've done the projections for the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. There are some high-scoring games. Chargers at Vikings is interesting. Obviously, Jacksonville on the bounce back against the Texans. Dolphins, Denver, Atlanta, Detroit. Then you scroll down defensively and actually offensively to Dallas, 13-point favorites in Arizona. We talked about the Chiefs and the Bears. And I'm just going to say this. I think it was Justin Fields and the Bears' last win. They came into Foxborough on that Monday night, 9-point underdogs, and they just steamrolled the Patriots here. Not that they're going to steamroll Kansas City, but it'll be interesting to see there. Shawn, Marty wants to know, what's your opinion of DeAndre Swift moving forward in fantasy?
I was actually last week, I was really high on him. I thought he was a really, really strong play. I know there was concern about the rotation at running back. I think that when he was on the field last week, it took Philly a little bit of failure in pass blocking to turn to him in the run game, but you could see what really he brought to the table. He ran hard. He had vision. He made plays. He's a really good pass catcher. He scored. There's a lot to like there. He is by far, for me, the best overall running back there. He should get the opportunity going forward. Can he stay healthy all year? I'm not sure. Will Philly rotate in the second back? I would believe so. But he made the offense better, and what he brings to the table makes that team a lot more explosive. So I think that I'd be excited to have him. I shied away from him in a lot of drafts, and even in the best ball ones, I probably only tied him with the Eagles. I think he just went into a kind of a spot where I was looking for a different wide receiver running back, and he didn't slide. But I think he's a really good player, and I think he's, when he's on the field, he's going to be, almost an automatic start for me going forward.
Are you under the assumption Gainwell plays or not? Of course, it's a Monday night game. If you have other options, are you moving off of Gainwell this week?
Yeah, I don't think I would play Gainwell this week. I think Gainwell will get on the field as the number 2. The problem is that the Eagles don't throw enough passes to their running backs, at this point of the year or even last year, to kind of trust them in PPR formats, to have a decent floor to play 2 of them. So whoever's starting and get the bulk of action is going to be the only player of interest for me. I would think that Swift ran the ball well enough that he would probably get the first shot at the goal line stuff. But I should say the second one, because, when they're at the 1 yard line, they're going to give it to the quarterback, whatever, and they're just going to plow it home until somebody stops that play of theirs. But Gainwell, they won passing downs in the past. They've put him in at the 5 yard line, and they've let him, run the ball in, sneak it in. So, but Swift, I think Swift just jumped him as overall, big playability, is ability to catch the ball a little bit more explosive for me. So, but Gainwell will get some action, but he's in the backseat for now until at least gets healthy.
All right, I'm going to flip the script to you. Let's talk Millie Maker. Let's talk whatever company you're going to for parlays or the Sunday. We'll get off the regular season, long season drafts here and teams, and let's dig into, I never drafted any teams. I want to skin in the game. I'd like to play some DraftKings. I'd like to do some FanDuel, whatever it is, Prize Picks, Underdog. There's a million of them out there. The stage is yours. Quarterback, running back, wide receivers, whatever you're seeing for Sunday's matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, right out of the gate when you saw the matchups this week. I mean, the Vikings and Chargers kind of stand out at such a high total, and the Vikings have thrown the ball really well. The Chargers have really struggled against the pass, and in this gambling world that you're more familiar with than I am, at least for work wise. Nothing's that easy. You know what I mean? They don't give away money in these things. So, if the Chargers or the Vikings, have long drives, and, eat up 7 or 8 minutes and they score and the other team does the same thing, it kind of changes it. So, both defenses will allow the other team to move the ball, but will they big plays? Obviously Justin Jefferson is a monster. I think that the Chargers can make big plays at times, but I think they're more ball control, especially with Eckler in there. I think that's losing him is a factor. So it kind of starts there. Do you want to be in that game? And that's kind of playing the favorites. So, but Cousins kind of projects well. He's 6,900 at DraftKings, and Herbert has the talent to kind of do it. He's been okay the first 2 games, but he hasn't been on the winning ticket, and he's been running the ball a little bit more. So I think that I probably won't settle on the quarterback until I decide on my core players. And I think of it this way, that there's 2 or 3 games that I think that they use a couple of players in their offense that have a chance to come in. I mean, Pollard has been pretty good this year. But in both games, Dallas played from the lead. They played a pretty good Jets defense. They really didn't have to do a lot of offense in New York. And even last week, they were, against the Giants the first week. And last week, Jets have pretty good defense that they, Pollard's averaging like 3-something yards a catch, 5-something yards per rush. He's got a few touchdowns. He's got 7 catches last week. He looks pretty good, but this is a game where maybe he can kind of finally hit on a big play and maybe score multiple touchdowns. I really liked what I saw out of Lamb last week. So I've kind of got the mindset that I think that either Lamb or Pollard come in. And then the same thing when you get into Detroit, Gibbs, that bump in playing time or chances with Montgomery out gives him a chance to shine. And he's a guy that could just be an absolute star if he hits on a long play and if he catches on a couple passes and he gets into the end zone more than once. And I think his salary is not, cheap. It's 6,600 at DraftKings, so he potentially, needs a 26. But, I think that the star power and what people drafted him, in the season long believe that. So, and, Amon Brown, St. Brown, pretty good the first 2 games, 6 for whatever, 70 yards and a touchdown, 6 for 106, missed a little time. He's a little nicked up, but, he's kind of the guy, can be 8 for 111 and, 2 touchdowns once in a while. And he scored, I think, all 6 of his touchdowns at home last year. So, Atlanta played 2 games at home. They go on the road. Detroit, really good offensive line. Their running backs played well last year. It kind of sets up, like, I think Gibbs is the guy. And I think one of the Dallas guys are very interesting to me to put in. So then, which 2 are you going to settle on? And is there a secondary option to work in? So I kind of thought that, like, at the low end of quarterback, I know I talked a little bit earlier, is Shawn. He was 6,100. Most people like, he's terrible. Why would I want to play him? All his options. But, Tennessee has given a lot to wide receivers. His receivers are relatively cheap. His tight end has done nothing, and he's 4,200. Amari Cooper's 5,700. Wasn't supposed to play Monday. Kind of like fits the dynamic of that box. Kind of fits. Even Donovan People-Jones could hit on a long pass in this game. So it's okay. Do I want to say this is my number one lineup? No, but in $1 million maker, I have to keep an open mind. And I'm trying to find value somewhere. And I think the combination of Cleveland passing game looks better than their running game this week, at least as far as matchup. And the other one is that maybe Garoppolo, Devontae Adams, pretty good player. Even Jacobs, is, last year touched the ball a ton. The matchup is pretty good for him to kind of bounce back and maybe do something. I think he was -2 yards and 9 carries last week, had 5 for 51 catching the ball. So if he does revert to form of like last year, he had a nice run where he scored 30 points, like 3 straight games. And he really, the first 2 or 3 weeks, he was, gave you 13, 14 points, nothing special. And he's been slow out of the gate. Obviously, the holdout might be a factor there. So I think that, I think the Raiders have enough to pass the ball. So I think, I like Adams a lot. I just think that he's, kind of a stud and was impactful a lot last year. So, I don't love Jacobs' start to the year, but I can't dismiss that he's in play. So those are the kind of like the 3, like where one receiver or one running back might come in and could be the starter of a foundation of your team. And then probably
Let me ask you one thing. Let me interject. We got a couple questions here from Andrew, and this is regular season, Shawn. Not that you can't handle going back and forth. First question was: would you start the Gus bus over Najee if Justice Hill is out? I'm hearing toe. As soon as I hear toe, I obviously think turf toe. I'm assuming Justice Hill isn't playing there. So Gus over Najee. His second question is interesting. He goes, he's got Alan Pickens and Nico Collins, who's had a great start. I had Nico Collins in diapers every year, got off of him for the Tank Dell, who had a good week last week. But he's got Alan Pickens and Collins starting, but has Addison on the bench this week. Would you bench any one of those in the matchup versus the Chargers? Full PPR, he says, redraft.
Gus Edwards over Najee Harris is interesting. I mean, it's not. I mean, he's game flow should give him a chance to score, and they should play from the lead. So I would think that he's pretty good chance of getting 17, 18 rushes, possibly more, and a touchdown. Harris, we just don't know what his total package is going to be until they play better offensively. He might get a couple of catches, and Warren might get more of them. I wouldn't. I could say you could play Edwards over him based on overall play, and I'm not fearful that I'm going to make a big mistake there because Warren's a factor, so I'm all right with that. Addison, I mean, Collins played well enough where you kind of think that you kind of have to start him. The targets are there. They threw the ball, 51 times the first 2 games. Pretty impressive for, a young quarterback playing Miami, most likely going to score some points at home. So at Collins, I kind of would rate over Pickens. I mean, Allen is a start anyways, no matter what. But Addison, I think I actually would play Addison over Pickens because I think the offense is better. They throw the ball 40-something times. I can't say Pittsburgh's anything. And he hasn't proven to me where I think that he's going to catch, 5 catches a game and potentially get a touchdown. He looks good with those jump balls that he, gets and stuff like that. And he made one play last week, but I think, the consistency factor might not be there. And not that Addison has a carved out role exactly, but the chance of Minnesota scoring is higher. And I think that, he could catch 4 or 5 balls, get his 60, 70 yards, and have a higher chance of scoring in this game. So that's how I would view that. But, it's Addison's an interesting player, especially if they could fall from the behind, because he's going to have some of those 7 for 100-yard games as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people all summer long was already anointing him as just going to come in and plug and play and become Adam Thielen. And he's had flashes. I had him in the starting lineup last week. Actually, I think I played him both weeks so far as a flex or something in one league. Speaking of Adam Thielen, Jesus, I have 0 draft shares of him, 0 interest. And wow, he's had a great start there. All right, I cut you off there. Thank you, Andrew, for those questions. Anyone watching and listening that wants to keep on asking, we will get to any questions here before we wrap things up. Were you leaning next to the tight ends, or did I cut you off again on another potential stack, Shawn?
No, but I just switched to. I just looked at the projections, and for Addison, in Pickens, it was really close. Pickens was 5 for 60 with a 75% chance of scoring. Addison was 5 for 72 with a 75% chance of scoring. And it's a lot closer than you think. And, or a way I was kind of painted. But like I said, I guess my defining factor is, do I think Minnesota can score more passing touchdowns than Pittsburgh? And I think so. I think Pittsburgh could, score on the ground in this game. So, but I wouldn't fault you if you went the other way either. I wouldn't fault you if you sat Collins figuring 2 big games. You can't do it 3 in a row. Maybe they got one pretty good cornerback there. I know the other one got injured. So, he doesn't have a history of having that kind of level in consistency. So, but that's where this is exactly the kind of the situation we talk about. You got 3 players are relatively close, and you have to make a decision and throw one. And some weeks they're all going to be okay, and some weeks there's going to be a wide spread on all 3 of them. 2 of them are going to be bad, and one might be just okay, or one might be explosive. So consistency is such a big factor for me when you're deciding between receivers, and it's hard to do.
And I'll tell you this, I have a hard time. I understand Andrew's pain here, because I have a hard time thinking 820 game in the dome, fast track against a real bad Raiders defense. And I know Nico's had 2 great games. And again, I'm going to learn a lot this week, because I'm not that I'm defending Pickett. Okay, Pickett was 17 for 19 in preseason. As you said, their offense looked real good. They looked sharp. I really think not enough people are taking into consideration how much that loss of Deontay Johnson was. That was like going to be a safety blanket. Was it 2 years ago? 149 targets. He is gone now. No one's there. Allen Robinson's supposed to step in and at least help out. And maybe it was the Browns last week. I don't know. But I will tell you this. I will start this show next Friday at 101. If Pickett lays an egg and the Steelers offense lays an egg, I was 1,000% wrong. I really was. And I'm hoping I don't start the show that way, Shawn.
Yeah, it hurts that they lost their other receiver, obviously. And then they've had, like you said, they came out of the gate and they played 2 pretty good defenses. So that's a factor in the success as well. So he did, against San Francisco, didn't he throw a ton of balls in that game? So he ended up being okay, and he had they were losing. He threw 46 times, but he gained 5 yards per pass attempt, and he was sacked 5 times. Wide receivers were 19 for 27, 185 yards. But so he will have his shots, and they're in the hunt. They're 1-1, and that division has changed with Cincinnati being 0-2, Cleveland's 1-1, and what's the other team today? Baltimore, started out okay. So we will see.
All right, go ahead, keep going. Tight ends, or was there another stack that you were looking at?
Yeah, so it's just wide receiver obviously at the top end. We got I had Tyreek Hill rated on the first projection a little lower than expected, because Denver really gave up really short yards per per catch to wide receivers out of the gate, and they were pretty good last year. I think that was an outlier, so I kind of bumped up Hill, where he had 7 for 100 and a touchdown, but still not the top receiver in the game. So I think it's a little against the grain. Jefferson, I think I was talking about them. The Chargers secondaries had 32 catches, 565 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think that really stands out there when you're talking about, Addison, is that they've allowed 17.7 yards per catch, but there's always that correction that goes the other way. It can't happen. Teams get better. Lamb, I talked about. AJ Brown, been relatively quiet, really wanted the ball. They tried to get him twice. He caught a touchdown call back. Next play, just missed him on another one, but really didn't have the big game. And really the Eagles window hasn't been there as far as Hurts having a long time to throw to get the ball downfield. But they do have a good offensive line, should bounce back. I expect them to throw the ball better, and Brown to be kind of a guy that could pop this week. Talked about Amon-Ra, Ridley, really good week 1. I think he falls into that class elite wide receiver that can have the big games, and his salaries 7,200 DraftKings, 7,500 at FanDuel. Where against Houston, Zay Jones out of there. I mean, you can't dismiss him. I think Waddle, I'm not sure he's going to play, but if you're going to use the thought process that Devontae Adams had a kind of a short game against Denver the first week, and then Jacoby Myers had the wide receiver too, kind of had a really good game, 9 for 81, 2 touchdowns. Maybe this is the game that Waddle kind of has that a little bit more. I mean, he's averaging over 20 yards a catch, but he's only had 11 targets. Catch rate's fine, 8 for 11. Came out of the game with a concussion, still in concussion protocol, but he has a chance to suit up if he plays. Surtain will see a lot of Hill, so he's kind of the guy that's on the opposite side. We talked about Cooper a little bit, and lower, Drake London, kind of 5,000. Looked like he was, not that great a play last week after a 0. Going to catch Jared Alexander, but he ended up being 6 for 67 and a touchdown. I think the matchup in Atlanta, especially if Atlanta gets a lead, probably favors him a little bit better to, at least get a few more chances, but he's still going to have to get that touchdown. So like end of last year, he was, like 5 or 6 catches a game, 80-something yards, but if he gets a touchdown, it kind of makes sense. Zay Jones, a little quick guy, really didn't do much last week, maybe against the Colts. Colts played pretty good against the run the first 2 games. So one of the receivers at Baltimore might do something, and he makes the most sense. They do have the tight end back. So, those are the kind of top ones, at least, going through it. And there's not any, I guess the only Amari Cooper was the only outlier name. I did talk about the Puka a little bit, and, Kenny repeat and the history of it, and I kind of scoured the sports book lines. His over-under in receiving yards is 63.5. Like, all right, well, he blew by that first time, but I think they're fearful to put the catch line up there because, like, what would you do? Where would you put the catch line for somebody like that? Are you going to put a 6 or a 7? I mean, if he puts 7, you're going under, right? You figure he hasn't done it. Cincinnati's pretty good, but they ran a lot of plays for their receivers. Both of them look pretty good. Stafford got the ball out, but he threw it 55 times. If Burrow plays, it would favor for, more of a chaser game or more throws by the Rams. So there's a lot of dynamics to that part of it. But, man, he's looked pretty damn good. But Brandon Marshall, I've seen him have those games where he gets those 15 catches in a game. Great player. And he comes back and, has a nothing game. So, and he's a little banged up. He's got a little bleak thing. So, man, can that guy make it through the whole season healthy? And, can Kupp gun on the field? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out by the end of the year.
It's funny because I was sitting watching the 4:00 games week 1, and I think Seattle went to the locker room with a 6-point lead. I think the Ram guy missed 2 field goals, or they each missed one right at the end there, and then it was just like the light switch went on. And the second half, the Rams just dominated. And then the 49er game, the Rams really were up 7 right before the half. And then Shanahan decided to go for it, 4th and 1 from the goal line with 1 second left. And they tied the game. And there still was a good flow in the mid-third until Corinne Williams went out for a 5-yard catch, and it went off his hands, picked off, and then they got outscored by 10 points, and it was that last-second field goal for the cover for the Rams. But my point is, it's Kupp 2.0 all over with. Puka is Kupp right now. And the other guy that we haven't talked about that I picked up in all the spots last week, and I actually played him. Give us your thoughts on Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, I really, because I was in Las Vegas, I couldn't see his usage in where he was catching the ball as well from where I was perspective. There was like 3 TVs close to me, and it might not be the Rams. I didn't see a lot of Jacksonville, so I didn't really have a good look of how he, but when you see the line 6 for 106, they kind of using a deep passing game. But last week, I end up losing a 5-team parlay that was worth $4,000. Because I took the under on him at 4. I think 4 was a kind of a push. 5 was a lot, but what they end up doing, they ran plays for him close to the line of scrimmage and got him active, probably maybe figuring that the 49ers are going to defend him for deep in the passing game. So I like the way they used him, and he showed him a little more depth to his game than I expected, especially when he didn't do much last year. So, probably my fault for not seeing the first game and, being just, all right, this guy had a really good game, 6 or whatever, and he's going to have a thing. So I wish I would have picked another thing, because that kind of would bankroll some of my daily stuff. So, but I like what I saw. But is he going to, can those guys catch 100 balls each this season? I don't think so. But Puka's definitely on a pace to do it for sure. So it'll be interesting. So so that was interesting. At the tight end position, I think that let's see here. We blasted through the running backs for Pollard, Robinson, Jacobs, talked about him, Gibbs. ETN fits the profile, just playing at home, didn't do much last week. Houston was pretty bad against running back last year. Pacheco playing at home against the Bears, bad against running back. They fired the defensive coordinator, but he's a little banged up. Not sure he's going to kind of go for sure, but I think he goes. But, he does have a little bit of injury risk, so he might want to shy away. But he's priced low enough where he gets a touchdown and 100 combined yards and like 2 or 3 catches, he'll be okay.
Let me interject right there. I picked up CEH in a few spots. I do have Pacheco. If Pacheco is not a go, are you comfortable in the regular season leagues to play CEH, or are they going to use the rookie, or is this a McKinnon game who's been nowhere to be found so far?
I think McKinnon kind of like makes sense sometimes in he's thing. I think that the price point for Edwards-Helaire was pretty cheap. I think that I would gravitate toward him, try to save a little bit of salary, and I think the matchup's pretty good. But I can't dismiss McKinnon stealing the thunder. He's it's hard finding running backs in the DFS market that are really cheap these days, and I think that so if either one of those, if you were doing a 2 teams and then like $1 million maker for $20, you could use 1 and 1 and kind of mix it up. They kind of make sense. I kind of made that mistake with McKinnon last week. But it's just that the Chiefs, I mean, they can probably score 30 points in this game. They have to bounce back offensively. They're scoring 18.5 a game. Kind of struggled to move the ball. Both games were on the road, right? So now they're going home. So, but I wish they would tighten up the rotation for the receiving options at least. I just think it adds more. It just gets better structure and you can more trusted assets. When you get all this kamikaze guys shifting and in and stuff, it's hard to get better timing and stuff like that with a quarterback. And I know Mahomes is great and he makes the players around him better, but it'd be interesting to see if he could just have 3 receivers that he played all the time and 1 running back that caught the ball. It's just kind of it's tricky over there.
I waved the white flag, I think, this week. I just I have some Rashee Rice. I have some Sky Moores. I think I got Kadarius Toney in one spot. And I saw a tweet today. He's got his house up for sale on Zillow, so maybe he's going to be moving out. Quick question from Brian. Brian wants to know, with Myers now healthy, Shawn, do I keep Big Mike Williams as my flex, or do I stack Myers with Devontae Adams, full point PPR?
That's an interesting question because, Williams is, he just looks like he could be really, really good and he kind of explosive and have big games, where I think Myers, he had that monster game in week 1 and he scored a little bit more last year. But, when he started his career, he had, you got some catches in New England, 80-something. I think 84 was his top there. But, he just didn't add those touchdowns and he really didn't make a lot of big plays. But the usage for him in week 1, pretty exciting. Will he score again? I'm not sure. I think Williams has a better chance of potentially giving you a 9 for 120 and a touchdown than Myers does. But at the same time, I think Williams is the same guy that could go 2 for 20 and kind of, give you a bad game. But the matchup is more favorable for Mike Williams as far as the chaser game, and the Vikings defense isn't great. So I would probably play Williams, even though Myers has played pretty well. It's just like I said, I think that in the drafting world, Mike Williams is drafted in the 4-5 turn, where Myers was probably 10-11. So you probably was getting drafted as a late wide receiver 3 on some teams, or a wide receiver 4. So I would probably stick to my guns and play the higher drafted player. He was pretty good last week, 8 for 83 and a touchdown. Not a touchdown, double-digit targets, but he had a couple shots where he could have scored. He never really had that play where he could have had a long touchdown or anything last week. But I've seen that in the past. So very interesting, coin flip there.
Yeah, and I was amazed and shocked how Jimmy G was so fixated on Myers in week 1. It was just like every play was bing, it was bang. A guy here, myself, that had Myers in diapers for the Patriots, his problem was he couldn't find the end zone. And there was a stretch where, they kept trying to feed him just so he finally could get in the end zone. But reminds me back of the day, Shawn, of Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry was going to be your 5, 6, 7, 8 catches for 70, 80, 90 yards, and was always that touchdown predicated on whether you're going to have that good week with him. Myers the same way, and as you said, in week 1 he found the end zone. So with Brian here, I think I lean the same way, where you got Devontae Adams and you got Mike Williams, both great matchups, could be high scoring, and the over-unders are one thing, but the key to success in daily and in fantasy is game flow. So it does you no good if Minnesota's up 31-3. Yeah, Herbert will be chucking and ducking, and the same with the Raiders. If Pickett sucks, the Steelers suck, and it's 24-7, and it will become the Josh Jacobs show.
And interesting that the thing with the Raiders, the first 2 games, is that they haven't really incorporated their tight ends in the passing game. And last week, the injury to Myers, Renfro, he got a 1 late catch, but he really didn't get any chance. They didn't really spread the ball around. It just didn't. It was the weird dynamic. So that's actually good for Myers, is that if they're going to have a tighter rotation of their targets, gives them more value than probably we thought during the season. But that could also change. At some point they do have to do a better job, moving the ball around and driving the ball. And I think the other thing that the first 2 games, the Raiders have only averaged 25 passes a game. I know that the Vikings, average 44, and most people probably believe the Chargers will end up being, first or second or third in pass attempts for the year, which creates more opportunities for their players. So, so like I said, there's a interesting, you got a reason to kind of bump Myers up, but there's also the overall volume is definitely for Williams.
Week 3 kickoff in a couple days. Shawn, closing thoughts for anyone jumping into the dailies, FanDuel, DraftKings, Prize Picks, Underdog, whatever it is. Any closing thoughts that might help one? And a lot of questions today. A lot of people watching and listening. So picking up some momentum here. So closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is finding that right combination of that low value hookup is kind of a key for the daily. I think that you can identify some of the star players that there's a group of 6 or 8 players that look pretty good at running back and wide receiver. You could say that the guy has the best matchup, but that doesn't mean the guy has the best game. It could be AJ Brown, it could be Jefferson, but Jefferson really kind of paints you in a corner. I like Lamb a lot. I like Gibbs. Pollard could pop. ETN, so there's a core of like 8 or 9 players that I think that are in play at wide receiver and running back. So can you find the best value at quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end? Like I said, I think the Browns had a chance. Nobody really stood up. Like I said, I talked about the Raiders a little bit, but nobody else really popped off the page for me. But I guess maybe I probably should, it's probably, an okay matchup is Gardner Minshew, because the Ravens looked like they were going to give up a lot. They had problems in the secondary. That changes dynamics if he starts. And I really didn't, it kind of still had Richardson as the starter. So, that probably bumps the Colts receivers, change that offense a little bit. And if he's like under 5,000, which he possibly could be at DraftKings, that does create a little more salary. And you don't need that great of a game from him if you can, get to some of those players, 250 and 2 touchdowns, probably going to be chasing the scoreboard. So, you got to kind of keep an open mind and not dismiss some of this stuff. And like I said, I wasn't thinking about him because, my last update will be, and I saw earlier today that Richardson still hadn't been cleared. So I thought, yeah, he's probably not going to go. So I guess that, and, probably the other thing is that maybe like, Houston's throwing the ball pretty good. First 2 games, maybe like Schultz or Dell, low value hookups out of that offense, to kind of go pair with because realistically, Jacksonville hasn't thrown the ball that well, and maybe Lawrence, pops this week with Ridley and, or somebody else in that offense, and that, Houston guys have more follow through after, showing last week, some success,
Thank Marty, Andrew. Who else asked a question here today? Marty, Andrew, and we had one more. I thought Brian. Thank you guys, everyone watching and listening on our YouTube station, on Facebook. The usual cast of characters on Friday brunch with the Dawg and the Desperados. Another great week, Shawn. Thank you as always. If you're not following Shawn, please go on to Twitter, X, wherever you want to call it today. Go to Shawn _Childs. You can get his work at Full Time Fantasy, and go subscribe at fantasyanalysis.substacks.com. As always, a pleasure here. 3:00, 3 Men in the Box with Matt Grissom. I think he's going to be live from the Circa, where you know very well, Shawn. In Vegas, we're going to talk some college football. And then at 5:00, Mr. Ron live from LA. We'll be talking some college football and some NFL. So for myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only, the Hall of Famer himself, Mr. Shawn Childs at Shawn _Childs. We wish everyone a great afternoon. Thanks for the questions. Ask away on our timelines if you have any more. Cash some tickets, and we'll see you soon.